Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So today we will be starting with the online sessions of third semester, and the subject or the course which I'll be dealing with is corporate governance. Today being the first session, we will first understand what is expected by the university that a MBA graduate should be aware of in terms of corporate governance. So 5 units are there. In brief, we will just discuss what is the information contained in these 5 units, and what we are supposed to learn through these 5 units. Now, corporate, before we go to the units, first let us understand what is corporate governance. This is a term which is which has become very much relevant within the business world after the emergence of the LPG policy adopted by the government of India in the year 1991. Before that, we all are aware that the rules and regulation for doing business were very strict in the country, and foreign investment was discouraged because of these strict rules and regulations. As the world's economy was opening up, the government of India also decided that to be in the race of competition with other countries, India has to open the door for foreign investment by making certain rules relax, or by making certain changes in the existing rules and regulations. So from that year onwards, this corporate governance, it is not that earlier corporate governance was not there. It was there. The problems related to corporate governance were very less because of the strict rules and regulations. But keeping in mind the foreign investment and one more concept, that concept is called of ease of doing business. Nowadays, the foreign investments or the foreign investors are looking towards only those countries which provide this facility called ease of doing business. Now, ease of doing business means where the rules and regulations are not very strict, are not very time consuming, are not very rigid, and it is easier for the foreign investors to invest the money in the country and in return to gain the profits for that investment. So that is in simple the ease of doing business. Now, corporate governance consists of two words. One is corporate, the other one is governance. Corporate, we all are aware of. What is the meaning of corporate? Corporate is which is related to business, which is related to business activities, which is related to companies, that is corporate. Governance is the rules and regulations by which the companies should function. So, corporate governance, in simple words, we can say it is the rules and regulations established through various acts which makes it compulsory for the organization to follow these rules and regulations when they are conducting their business activities. So, any company, any business house, any corporate, they cannot make the rules and regulations on their own. There are certain prescribed, laid down rules and regulations which they need to follow. So, earlier, these rules were very strict, but later on, there have been many changes made in these rules and regulations. The act or the law which regulates this corporate governance is Companies Act. Last year in semester one, we had discussed about Companies Act in legal aspects of business. There we had discussed about two acts, the Companies Act 1956, and then the new Companies Act came up in the year 2013. Now, here, when we will be discussing different terminologies or different concepts under corporate governance, here we will be discussing or we will be concentrating only on the Companies Act 2013, which regulates the governance of the company. That we are going to discuss in the coming sessions. So, what here we are going to discuss is what are the rules and regulations made for the company to function effectively, how these rules and regulation helps the company to run smoothly, as well as we are also going to discuss if certain rules and regulations are not followed by the company, what are the penalties which can be imposed on those companies. All these things we are going to discuss in the coming sessions. So we will start with the syllabus. In brief, we will discuss, and then we will directly move on to our first unit. So what we will be discussing under the unit one is the conceptual framework of corporate governance, its introduction, needs, scope, evolution of corporate governance, how it evolved. Then what are the developments of corporate governance in India? Then corporate governance code, agency theory. Then we will be talking about the elements of good corporate governance. Then what could be the elements of good corporate governance? We all are aware that there should be no fraud in companies. Because if frauds are there, it not only damages the image of the company, but financially, it causes loss to many, many investors who had invested money in that particular company. To avoid that, what are the elements of good corporate governance? How these frauds or this misappropriations can be avoided, that we will be discussing in the elements of good corporate governance. Then in unit 1, we will be discussing about the recent corporate governance companies report, like the NR Narayan Murthy report, then JJ Irani report, and the other very relevant reports, such as Kumar Mangalam Birla report, we will be discussing. Then we will be discussing the reports of the other countries also, not only of the committees of India, but we will be discussing that what are the contributions of these committees in terms of corporate governance in other countries also. Because in India, as we have already discussed, that we have started implementing this corporate governance lately. Earlier, the governance of company was regulated through Companies Act 1956. Later on, in late 90s or in early 2000, when there were certain frauds made by certain companies, which resulted in loss of money for many people, the government thought that there has to be certain committees set up by the government which can suggest the government that what changes can be made in the existing rules and regulations which can help the government to avoid these frauds. And keeping in mind, these committees were set up. Now, our corporate governance structure is basically existing or exists on the recommendation of a committee which was set up not by the government of India, but it was set up by the government of UK. That committee report is called as Cadbury report. The person who was named Cadbury, he was the person who headed this report. And this particular report is considered as the main report on which the corporate governance rules and regulations are based, not only in UK, not only in India, but in other countries also. This is regarded as one of the most important report in the field of corporate governance. That how the corporates should function, what are their duties, what are their responsibilities. It is not that ease of doing business doesn't mean that you can make the companies can prepare, they can make the rules and regulation as per their wish. They can change the rules and regulation whenever they want, but certain framework should be there, certain rules should be there. The company should have certain roles to be performed, certain responsibilities, certain accountabilities. So all these things are mentioned in the report which was prepared by Mr. Cadbury. That report was taken up by the government of India also. And when the Indian committee was constituted to come up with the guidelines for corporate governance, They also referred this particular committee, and they made the changes which suited the Indian scenario. It is not that as it is we are following that particular committee of UK. The expert committees set up by the government of our country, they went through with this committee, and wherever they felt that these particular provisions are not relevant to the Indian scenario, they made changes in those provisions also. That we will be discussing in the coming sessions when we will be discussing these reports. One very important thing we have to keep in mind here is that all these committees which we will be discussing, maybe the Kumar Mangalam Birla report or J.J. Irani report or K.R. Narayan Murthy report or two, three more reports that we will be discussing in the first session. One thing which is very common in all these reports is all these committees are headed by either the industrialists who are the owners of reputed industries or the people who headed these industries. That means the managing directors or chairmen or the CEO. So that is very common. 4 5 reports on corporate governance we will be discussing. And one thing is common, that all the chairmen of these committees are either the industrialists or they are the CEO of some reputed organization or managing director of some organization. Now, why this particular thing is there? Why this common feature has been kept in mind by the government whenever they are constituting the committee? And the reason is very simple, that the person who is from that particular field, who is industrialist or who has spent say 30, 40 years in the industry, are in a better position to prepare the guideline for the industry rather than appointing a bureaucrat or a politician as the chairman of the committee for corporate governance, rather than them, these people suggesting the company what to do and what not to do. It will be better that if industry own people are heading the committee, they will be in a better position to suggest or to prepare the new guidelines for the company. So that is what we will be discussing in our unit number one. Then in unit two, we will be discussing the board. Here, board means board of director. Every company which is listed, they have a board of director. How a board of director is appointed, how the board itself is constituted, what are the rules and regulations, are there any role and responsibility or accountability for board members, because board is considered as the highest authority of any company, which is responsible for taking all the key decisions related to the company. If the company is going for diversification, if the company is going for expansion, if the company is likely to give layoff to number of people, it is it cannot be decided by a single person who is the chairman or managing director or CEO of the company. But that chairman or CEO or managing director has to take the approval from the board for these major decisions. Major decisions. So all the major decisions are to be taken through the consent of the board of directors. How many members can be appointed as directors? What are the various types of directors? What is the remuneration of directors? What is the qualification of a director to be appointed in the board? What is the tenure of a director? All these things related to board of directors, we will be discussing in unit number 2. We will also be discussing that what are the duties and responsibilities of board of directors. It is not that if a person is appointed as a director in the board, he enjoys only rights and no responsibilities there. Responsibilities are also there. What are those responsibilities? How many meetings are to be conducted by this board? When the meetings are to be convened? Who will be keeping the record of those meetings? All these things we will be discussing in the unit number 3. Then whether training is required for the directors also. Because please remember that most of the directors are experienced people. A person is is appointed or nominated on the board of directors of a particular company mainly because of his talent, because of his intelligence, because of his experience in that particular field. That means the person who is having 30 years of experience, or more than 30 years of experience, or more than 20 years of experience, when he is being nominated or appointed on the board, is it necessary that this person should also be retrained? And if yes, what type of training is to be given for this particular person who is appointed at the highest board, highest level of the company? So, what type of training is needed for this particular person who is called as director at the board? So, that also we will be discussing. Then, the type of directors we will be discussing, type of committees or board committees we will be discussing in unit number 2. Then, in unit number 3, we will be discussing about the stakeholders. That now, here, stakeholders, we will concentrate more on shareholders and less on the other stakeholders of the company. What is shareholder? How a person becomes a shareholder? What are the rights of a shareholder? There are certain rights given. What those rights are? Rights of small shareholders and rights of large shareholders. That we will be discussing in unit number 3. How a shareholder who feels that he has been cheated by the company, where he can file the complaint, that we will be discussing in unit number 3. Then in unit number 4, we will be talking about mainly the controlling agency, or it is also known as the regulating agency. Now, one regulating agency which has become very famous, which we all are aware of, is SEBI. So not only SEBI, the other enforcing agencies like Companies Offences Wing, then the companies related appellate tribunals, also we will be discussing. But mainly, we will be focusing on SEBI. that is Securities Exchange Board of India. What are the roles and responsibilities of SEBI? That we will be discussing in detail. Then, what are the guidelines of public sector units? What are the guidelines of corporate governance for banks? What are the corporate governance guidelines for private institutions? What do you mean by risk management? What is calculated risk? All these things we will be discussing in the in our unit number 4. And unit number 5 is very interesting. Most of you might be aware of the things which we are going to discuss in unit number 5. And unit number 5 is related to certain cases, which makes it the most interesting part of discussion in corporate governance. That is unit number 5. What are the cases that we are going to discuss it? Very famous cases which we are going to discuss here is which are related to corporate governance. The case which is related to Tata Group and Cyrus Mistry dispute, the case which is related to the Punjab National Bank, the case which is related to Kingfisher Airlines, case which is related to the Fortis, the case which is related to the former ICICI chairperson, Mrs. Chanda Kochar and Videocon, as well as we will be discussing the very recent case which has once again has started coming up, and that is the Adani case. So these cases we will be discussing in chapter number 5. And these cases, as most of the cases you all are aware of, that what these cases are. So when we are aware of the cases, it becomes easier to understand the importance of corporate governance. That why there has to be certain guidelines. If no guidelines are there, there will be number of problems. Everyone will come up with his own rules and regulations. To avoid that chaos, there is a need for the guidelining principles of corporate governance. And these principles of corporate governance, they are considered as guidelines that every company has to prepare the rules and regulations for its smooth functioning. And these rules and regulations should be based on these common principles or these guiding principles of corporate governance that we are going to discuss. So that was related to the syllabus of corporate governance. I hope my voice is clear to all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
हाँ, थैंक यू, थैंक यू। बीच बीच में बोलो, मतलब मुझे भी पता चले कि ऑनलाइन the most important or the biggest disadvantage of online teaching is everyone is aware of. I need not give you what are the biggest disadvantages of this online teaching. That the person is not able to make it out whether the participants are in or out. We are talking about mentally in. So through online, it shows that everyone is there, or 30 are there, 40 are there, or 50 are there. But how many are really in, that it is difficult. There are very ways to check whether the crowd is actually there or not there. But we do not have that much of time to check every 5 minutes whether all the students are there or not. So, because the syllabus is vast and we have to complete it within a stipulated time given by the university. So, it is expected that everyone should be sincere, and it will help us if we keep it more interactive instead of only I talking. It will be better that if the others also start contributing, right? So today, being the first session, I have given you the brief idea of what corporate governance is. And now we will move on to our unit number one. That Yes, can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we will start with the unit number one, that is the meaning of corporate governance. In case of any doubt, in case of any query, please stop me then and there only, and you can ask me the query. You can unmute yourself and you can immediately interrupt me with your query. So, meaning of corporate governance that we have already discussed. This is what is the literal or technical meaning. The word corporate is used for relating to a business, especially a large business. Now, earlier also in the discussion, we had discussed that large businesses mean particularly those businesses which are listed, the companies which are listed. It is not that the companies which are not listed, they need not follow any rules and regulations. But corporate governance more concentrates, more focuses on listed companies or larger companies. Governance is the process of decision making and implementing those decisions. So, corporate governance is a mechanism, process, and relation by which corporations are controlled. So, we had discussed the simple words also in simple words, that the guidelines, that the rules, that the regulation, that the principles which are being made by the companies for smooth functioning. Those guidelines, those rules and regulations are included in the governance. So, that is the meaning of corporate governance. Now, the next meaning of corporate governance we will be taking up is the term corporate governance includes structure, system, and process a corporation uses to communicate authority, responsibility, and accountability among the stakeholders. Good corporate governance is one which balances the interest of various stakeholders, namely the company's employee, government, suppliers, owners, customers, to ensure long term sustainability and success of a corporate venture. So, this definition is a extensive or exhaustive definition which talks about the entire purview of corporate governance. So the first part is that it includes structure, system, and process a corporation uses to communicate authority. So in every organization, whether it's a small organization or a large organization, every organization is having a structure. In common parlance, we call it hierarchy. That there will be a managing director or CEO or general manager. Then there will be the senior manager, deputy manager, then executives, then officers, then supervisors, then the operators or employees. So this is called as the structure or the hierarchy. Why this structure is essential? To communicate authority. That who is the person who holds the key authority. It can be the general manager, managing director, or CEO of the organization. Then the next person, the person below him, who will be the person below that person? All these things are included in the hierarchy or structure of the organization, which makes it easier for function. Not only the employees of the organization are aware that what is the structure, what is the hierarchy in the organization. That if a problem comes in, that who is the person who can be consulted for solving that particular problem. And that is called as authority, hierarchy. A corporation uses to communicate authority, responsibility, and accountability among the stakeholders. Not only all the employees comes to know, the other stakeholders, can be, they have listed the other stakeholders also. Not only the shareholders, it can be the government, it can be the suppliers, it can be the customers. All these peoples are included in stakeholders. Their stakes are involved in the functioning of the company. So when the structure is clear, when the hierarchy is clear, when the stakeholders is also aware that who is heading the company, then they will have no doubt in investing in the company. So that is the importance of corporate governance. Now, how it evolved in India, that we are going to discuss, that how it evolved in India. So in 1997, the CII, Code of Corporate Governance. What do you mean by CII? Anyone who is aware of CII? It's a very common term. Most of you might have heard, most of you might be aware of. What is that? CII. Am I audible? मेरी आवाज आ रही है क्या?
Yes, sir.
हाँ, thank you. So CII is what? Very common term which every student should be aware of. It's related to business. It is what? Confederation of Indian Industries, CII. It's a very important body which represents the interest of industries. So CII was first to publish the Code of Corporate Governance, where constitution of audit committee was recommended. Audit committee. Now, after accepting the LPG, that is the open door policy, what is LPG, by the way? What do you mean by LPG? The government of India accepted this concept called LPG in 1991 under the prime ministership of Mr. Manmohan Singh. No, sorry, Dr. Manmohan Singh. What do you mean by LPG? It is not liquefied petroleum gas. Very important.
Liberalization, privatization, and globalization.
Very good, very good, very good. So LPG is liberalization, privatization, and globalization. The government thought that it has to accept this if they want foreign investment in the company. Once the government started this in 1991, immediately after 1 or 2 years, a major scam took place in the country. And that scam is known as a securities scam. Or in common language, it is also known as Harshad Mehta scam. I hope that everyone has heard about it. The government accepted this policy of LPG. They opened the door. They made certain relaxation in the existing rules, and immediately the loopholes on in those relaxations were used by this particular person, and through which he manipulated the figures, which resulted in loss of crores of rupees for the investors. Now, on the one hand, the government is trying to relax the rule to facilitate foreign investment. On the other hand, once the rules are relaxed, there are people like Harshad Mehta and others who uses these relaxation for their profit. How to have a balance that relaxation should also be there, but those relaxation should not work as a loopholes, which can be used by these people, any person, any organization, any company, for making illegal profit or unlawful profit. How to avoid that? For that, CIA, CII, that is the Confederation of Indian Industries, they came up with an idea of Constitution of Audit Committee. That audit should be properly done. Very important. There has to be responsibility, accountability on imposed on the auditors. That this is your role, responsibility, and accountability. If you fail to complete your role, then you will be held accountable or responsible for that particular problem or for that particular misleading figure or wrong figure, and action will be taken against the person, that is auditor. So audit committee, what are the rules and regulations of those audit committees? That we will be discussing when we will be discussing the unit number 2. That how many directors are to be appointed, what are the rules, what are the roles, how many times the audit committee should meet, how the audits are to be carried out. If the auditor fail to comply with certain rules and regulation, what are the uh, punishments which are mentioned in the Companies Act 2013. So all these things we will be discussing in the second unit. So CII, how it evolved in India, corporate governance. CII came up with the idea that the most important part is the audit part, because the frauds are financial. Financial means that the finance is involved, money is involved. Certain companies are playing with the figures in the balance sheet. Certain companies, what they do is they earn more profit, but they show very less profit in the balance sheet. On the other hand, to attract more investment, there are number of companies which show more profit rather than showing the exact profit. So exact profit, suppose if the company has earned the profit of say 100 crore rupees, and if they are manipulating the profit because of, through n number of channels, by using various loopholes, and they are showing say 500 crores of profit or maybe more than that of profit to attract more investment, that is not allowed. So that is to be avoided. So the CII thought that the most important part is the finance part, the audit part, the balance sheet part, how the balance sheets are to be prepared. If anyone is manipulating figures in the balance sheet, what strict action can be taken against those people. That was recommended by the CII in 1997. Then came up the Kumar Mangalam Birla report, uh, that is the Kumar Mangalam Birla Committee. This committee gave 25 recommendations of corporate governance for listed companies and to incorporate the same in listing agreement with the stock exchange. Again, now why these committees are appointed, and why it happens that once, suppose in 2000, Kumar Mangalam Birla committee has given 25 recommendations, 25 changes to be made in the existing company law or rules, other acts and laws related to companies. When 25 changes are made, why it is essential for the company, for the government to come up with, say in 2002, we can see that again, new committee was constituted. Again in 2003, new committee was constituted. Again in 2011, new committee was constituted. Why new committees are continuously being constituted? Because when the time is changing, when the technology is changing, when the business policies, practices are changing, all these things should be kept in, the changes in the laws also should be uh, uh, as per the changes in business practices, as per the changes in the technology. Earlier the technology was different, now the technology is different. So one rule made 10 years early cannot be the most relevant rule after 10 years. So whenever the government feels that changes are necessary they constitute a committee, or whenever there is a major fraud, the government constitutes one committee. That how these type of frauds can be minimized or if not avoided, because it is very difficult to avoid the frauds. Why it is difficult to avoid the frauds? Because every law or every rule has certain loopholes, and there are people who are so talented, so intelligent, that they use these loopholes for their own benefit. And because of that, the frauds takes place. We all are human beings, although there is a very clear rule that, suppose if government offices are there, it's a clear rule that there should be no dealing under the table. No bribe should be accepted while approving a project of a corporate. There is a written rule, there is a law, there is prescribed punishments are also there. If a person is caught doing this, then what punishments will be given to that particular government official. But still, we will find that things are existing, because we are not machines, we are human beings. Every human being is different from other. Morals, values of one person is different from the other. So it is very difficult to check or to curb corruption if everything is machine controlled. If no emotions are involved, no morals, no values are involved, everything is controlled by machines, then it may happen. Then it is possible that one rules and regulations are prepared. Those rules and regulations are fed in the machine as the instructions given to the machine, that these are the do's and these are the don'ts. As machines, the machines doesn't have the emotions, the beliefs, the values, the morals, there will be no corruption. But we all are human beings, and that is the reason why it is very difficult. So after every fraud, the government comes up with another committee, and that committee starts with the giving a certain recommendation. Okay, this fraud has taken place. Why this fraud has taken place? Who are the person responsible for that particular fraud? Then how that fraud can be, say, cannot be repeated in the future. All these things are recommended by the committee, and that is why certain committees are there. Then in 2002, Naresh Chandra committee was there. Major recommendation uh, were to from AC, consisting of all the independent directors, rotation, auditors, then after 5-year terms. Compulsory auditing. Then auditors should have a 5-year term, because before that it was realized that once a auditor is appointed by the company, that the auditor is there with the company, then before the appointment of the auditor, there in the audit committee, the first committee, that is by CII, They came up with the internal audit and external audit. Two concepts were there. Internal audit is to be done by the company itself, the company's finance department, and the external audit is to be done by an external audit. Now here, the Naresh Chandra committee came up with the idea that after every 5 years, the auditors are to be changed. Now, why they thought that this should be there? Because again, we all are human beings. When the auditor and the company are interacting for a more period, automatically what happens is we start developing a good rapport. And because of that good rapport, good relations between the auditor and the company, certain things which are not required or which are not lawful also, they are being ignored by the auditors also. Why? Because they have a good rapport. Or the auditor themselves will give the ideas to the company that how they can avoid certain rules. To curb that practice, it was decided that the duration should be of 5 years. There has to be rotation or reappointment. Then the Narayan Murthy committee then came up with the Narayan Murthy committee talked about the review or scope of audit committee. The other committees we will be discussing tomorrow. And once we are done with our first unit, then immediately we will start with our unit number 5, that is the cases for discussion. So unit number 5 will give you an idea that what is corporate governance, what are the guidelines of corporate governance, what are the principles and scope of corporate governance, then what are the good elements of corporate governance. So once you are aware of this, that what is expected in corporate governance, then it will be easier for you to understand why these cases that we are going to discuss have taken place, right? So that we will be taking up for discussion once we are done with our chapter number 1. So thank you everyone for being present in today's session. Again, tomorrow we will start the session at same time, 7 in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.